some years, I made the annual retreat with the Australians. Rita Balby joined me at one time, and at the beginning of Augustina's presidency, she and one of the Italian priests went over and made the retreat with the Australians. They've had their ups and downs. They're very much like the Americans. They have lost some. They are having a very difficult time finding vocations today, and there's much to be compared between our two countries. This bishop of whom I spoke a few minutes ago said to me when I first talked with him, "You know, your country and my country share very much. We came to Australia for physical freedom. Your forefathers came to America for religious freedom." And as you think this over, there certainly is a great deal of truth in it. I found it very interesting in Australia. They're great athletes. Because of their Christmas comes in their summer, they might go to Mass in the morning, but then they all go to the beach in the afternoon, and while they have dinner together, it really is a day spent on the beach. They're good athletes. It will be interesting to see what happens at the Olympics this summer, to be held in Sydney, Australia. I was also told on one of my visits there that they follow our fads very, very closely. However, they're about 5 years behind us, which is fortunate for them, because then the in thing is really on its way out, and it doesn't ever take the hold in Australia that it takes in other countries. One December, following the Central Council meeting, Elizabeth Peter and I went to Yugoslavia to be with the missionaries there when they made their annual retreat. It was a new world to me because I had never lived behind the Iron Curtain. They did. One of their young missionaries was the daughter of 2 school teachers, and because her parents remained true to the Catholic faith, they were no longer allowed to teach in Yugoslavia. Everyone, of course, was very aware of the communist influence, and I was told that I should not get a visa in the United States because it would attract too much attention. The reason I was allowed to go with Elizabeth Peter was because Yugoslavia did not want the Italians coming in. They could present quite a problem from the standpoint of Catholicism. So the two of us went. Elizabeth Peter was Viennese. When I arrived in Yugoslavia, when we arrived, I had to go and get a visa. Elizabeth Peter already had one, but I had to go and get a visa. And I had no trouble because I had a return ticket 4 days later or 3 days later. And they knew I wasn't going to stay very long. So we went outside out of the airport building, and there we found the priest, a friar, whom I had known from previous meetings in Rome. He took us to a place to sleep, and it was so cold. But I was really very interested the next morning when I was awakened, and the first thing that I was given was a glass of liqueur. I never had it on an empty stomach, but it sat quite well, and I could see where it had made the little red corpuscles go round and round, and you didn't feel quite so cold when you got up in the morning. It had snowed most of the night, and as we drove down to the seaside where we were going to stay in the convent to make this retreat, I can still close my eyes and see the ice on the trees. It was just like fairyland. In Zagreb, the um, nobody went to bed, nobody even came inside until quite late at night. And I remarked about the fact that the people afraid to stay out on the street so late. And I was told, no, that there was really no crime. The communists took care of that. They had a street market, and I wanted to go to visit it. Father said he didn't think it was quite the place to do it, but he would go in my stead. So I told him what I wanted, and he said, do you have American cash? And could I use your American cash? And I said, of course. He then went on to tell me how he could never buy any books because they didn't have any currency at that time that was good outside of the country, so he couldn't send for books. But if he had some American cash, he could send for books. So I saw that he had enough American cash to buy any number of books. That, I thought, too, was indicative of the country. At the end of the retreat, he drove us up to Trieste, where we would take the plane back to Rome. Several of the missionaries went with us, and as we were driving along, one of them exclaimed, but in her own native language, which I didn't understand, but Father translated, that she had forgotten to leave her money at home, and if she went into the airport with the money, they would take it from her. So I said, well, I will take the money and then give it back to you. But that wouldn't work because then she would have to come back out of the airport anyway. If I left, I would have to give the money back to her. So she had a little package of Kleenex with her, and I have never seen anyone open a package of Kleenex so cleverly, stick the bills in, and put the little packet together again so that you would never have known it had been tampered with. And I thought of the things that people must do under these circumstances to keep on living and let their lives go along on what we might call a fairly normal course. The young missionary to whom I referred once before died very suddenly from a thrombosis, and she was really the light of the missionaries there, and it was quite a dramatic shock for them. We've always thought that newcomers to the Institute were sent to the Institute by her after she got up into heaven and talked it all over with Armida Varelli and St. Francis. Grishina from Poland invited me to come to visit them. She was the foundress in Poland, a medical doctor, a cardiologist, and for some few years we paid her dues for a subscription of one of the cardiology magazines printed here in the United States. When she would write to me, she always wrote on a postcard, and as she said, that meant that the communists could read anything, and they knew that she had no secrets enclosed in her correspondence. I went there in '82, the year that my presidency here in the United States was over, and going with me were several other people and Father Jeff. We went on then to Assisi following the visit in Poland and made our retreat in Assisi. We were very well taken care of in Poland. We were not left alone for 1 minute because we stood out like sore thumbs. I even had on white shoes, and I didn't realize that one didn't wear white shoes. I think mine were the only pair in Poland. They were still living under communist rule, and we had to be very, very careful. One of the places we went to visit was Czestochowa, the home of the Black Madonna. There we stayed with a group of sisters, and it took me a long time to realize that one of the little pictures they handed me was the picture of a number of their sisters being gunned down, and the bodies would fall into the deep ditch that had been dug in back of them. And they it was very hot in Poland at that time, and when they offered Mass, all the windows, everything were closed so that no sound went outside. Um, you really wondered whether you were going to survive the tremendous heat, but we all did. Now a word or two about the villas in the U.S., although their stories are pretty well documented in our first 25 years. The book which we published at the end, in 78, the end of our 25th year of profession here in the United States. We began to feel, because the our country was so big and we were receiving inquiries from around the country, that we needed a central meeting place, plus the fact that the Prava Mater Ecclesia, which was promulgated by Pius XII in 1947 and really gave us a standing in the church, said that there should be in every country a place where missionaries could come for formation and so on. And so we felt that we really had to carry that out. I was not too impressed with the idea of a central house, because I felt that it detracted from our secularity. But I was always overruled, and so from my house, which was just a 3-bedroom home, we branched into what was known as our first villa on Cedar Lane in Bethesda. We called it Villa Cortona because we found it on the feast of St. Margaret of Cortona. It had belonged to, and at the time we were looking at it, the friars who were part of the Academy of American Franciscan History were selling it to move into a larger place. So, with the permission of the Archbishop of Washington, Archbishop O'Boyle, we decided to buy it. I sold my house and put the money into the new Villa Cortona, and then we got through the Archbishop. We were able to get a loan from one of the banks in the Washington area, and we were able to pay for the building, and then started to pay back the loan. We had seen only 1 or 2 spots, like the chapel and the front hall, because the rest was cloistered. So we were very interested in moving in, and we had many, many funny experiences as we began to settle into Villa Cortona. We were all working at that time, and those who settled in were Katie Atwater. No, those who settled in were Marion Griesheimer, Connie, myself, Stella, Mary Hatfield eventually. Then when Mickey was stationed back in Bethesda, she sold her house and moved in with us. And eventually Nancy came down to see about the Institute, and when she came down to stay, she also lived at Villa Cortona. was a place out on the water and on an island in the bay. And the only way you could get there was by a little rowboat. Or I'm sure if you had enough money, you could have bought something that had a motor in it. But we decided that wasn't very good either, and so we gave that up. Finally, then, we did find the Academy of American Franciscan History and settled on that. The Third Order of St. Francis met there, and it at that time was growing by leaps and bounds, so that we were fast outgrowing it. The only place we had for a chapel big enough to accommodate the Third Order was what had been the library for the friars. So every month on Saturday night, we would have to set up the altar, set up the chairs, and get ready for the Mass the next morning. So we established in the Third Order a setting up and taken down committee. This was mostly of men who could bring in the altar, bring in the chairs, set them up, and then take them all down when the Mass was over. Among our tertiaries were Evan and Gertrude Scholl, and they realized that we were fast outgrowing the place, so they offered us their property. That didn't appeal to me at all, and I was really very much against it. Everybody else thought it was a great idea, so we accepted. I did not want us to be under the tutelage of any other group of people. I felt that we had to maintain our independence as an institute. And in drawing up the plans and so on for the Villa Cortona, we did manage to keep our independence. It was hard because Evan wanted us to get all our food from the cafeteria, and I would not agree to that. It was a good thing we didn't, because we had to establish and stand on our own 2 feet. Then once Father Stevens said to me, "You know, Barb, you wouldn't think that you and I were striving for the same thing, because we're always on the 2 sides of the question. You and I never agree." And I think that was really true. He thought this was a wonderful idea. I thought it was not a wonderful idea. However, I realize now that it served a very great purpose in the United States. It was the place where the missionaries could gather. It was, as another missionary, not myself, said more than once, that it was the cement that kept us all together. And I think that that is true. Times changed, and we did not have the personnel to carry it on. The younger missionaries had other ideas, and their ideas were as valid as ours, but we could not carry it on. We could not afford to have outside help all the time, and so we had to sell it. Well, it's been very hard, I think. I can't blame what I see as a wavering community spirit totally on the lack of a Villa Cortona, but I can see now where Villa Cortona played a very positive part. All has not been pie in the sky for the Institute in the United States, but I think we have done very well with the grace of God. Times have changed. Even our ideas about the Institute have changed to a certain extent. The charism has remained the same and is as valid today as it was when we first learned of it. That is good. But the way in which we live has changed. Without the Institute, we've all been, I don't mean that, I mean without the Villa, we have spread around the country, and it was really the 3 of us, Mickey and Connie and myself, who moved the farthest away, went to a part of the USA where we had never lived before, and were the first ones to really blaze a trail of retirement living. Joan, of course, had lived in Phoenix for some years before we arrived in the Southwest. She lived with her mother, and that was a home atmosphere, and it was a beautiful atmosphere. But Uh, we moved into a retirement center, a evangelical Lutheran one to boot, because the Catholics were not up to snuff and had not yet really seen the need to have retirement places. Now, on the East Coast particularly, there are many retirement centers that are Catholic. We couldn't afford to stay on the East Coast. The prices were too high. That was another reason that we moved to the Southwest. My family was here. That was what attracted me. And Connie and Mickey sort of followed. It was nice for the three of us to move in. It was a gradual period of transition, I think, from having lived together, being part of a group, um, and seeing the Institute as a group of like-minded women living together. The we were even then we were not a community in the sense of a convent, but there was a community spirit that existed. When Connie died, things changed out here a little bit. We Mickey had her own apartment. I had mine. I've always seen Manzana del Sol as a field of apostolate for me, as a place of mission where I could live out my missionary life. I have never wanted any of the people here to know about my missionary life. I wanted them to see me as an ordinary woman who was trying to live a Christian life. And in some ways, I think I have succeeded. There is a mission field here. It's amazing to see how many people can live without God, really. They just don't believe he exists, and up to a point they get along fine. But I think of this as my field of mission. It's different from anything I had planned, but then a lot of things in my life were not as I had planned them, and I doubt that no matter how long I live, I don't think that my will be the one that is followed.